start, I'd like to welcome you all to LitLive Online, brought to you by the same group of literature enthusiasts here in Hamilton who have been presenting for many years in-person writers to in-person audiences under the banner of the LitLive reading series. We were doing our act until March 2020, when of course the pandemic struck, and one of the casualties of the pandemic was the Staircase Theatre in Hamilton, where we had been presenting our act on stage with microphones and PAs and whatnot. So after a hiatus, we're back on Zoom now. Some things remain the same. We pay our writers the same rates as when they were appearing for us at the Staircase. And LitLive Online is still, I should mention, a free event and will remain so for the foreseeable future. LitLive continues to be funded by the Ontario Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts, and to those organizations and to our audiences, we are sincerely grateful. One of our goals is still selling books, and we feel that book sales are an important part of the reason why we do this event. We will miss the conversations around the book table, of course, which was run for many years by our committee member, Jennifer Tan. And the 5 writers that we have here tonight, I'd encourage all of you to post a link on our Facebook group, which is named the LitLive Reading Series. And please do promote the book you read from tonight, because there will be people coming to that Facebook group all through the month, and they'll find out about your book there. And one of the things we noticed, or at least I noticed in our last meeting, was that any documentation we created through the video, like our chat conversation, any information that was there got lost to the general public as soon as the meeting was over, whereas the Facebook group will remain there basically in perpetuity. So please do advertise the book that you'll be reading from tonight. Technical management of tonight's event is being handled by Gary Barwin. Susan Shaw has done most of the work in booking and scheduling the readers. Christine Missione will moderate the Q&A with the authors afterwards at the end of our reading event. And we have 5 readers tonight. And at our intermission, we will present a live musical performance by Gareth Inkster. Our committee is rounded out by Liz Tessier, who reads more of the applications to LitLive than anybody else, and Ben Robinson, who is lately becoming our booking agent for musical acts that we will continue to feature during our intermission. I'm your host, Chris Pannell. And at this point, I want to recognize and acknowledge that the LitLive Online Reading Series is hosted in Hamilton, Ontario, and our events are part of the cultural life of a city built on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. I should also mention, for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, that there are a few personal controls that you can use to modify your experience of the event. In the upper right corner are 2 buttons for the gallery view and the speaker view. Gallery view shows you all the images of the participants. And as more and more people join, of course, the screen begins to look like a checkerboard. Or you can go to the speaker view, which focuses just on the person that Zoom has put the focus on, meaning the person who has the speaking floor at the moment. And you can use your own audio controls to adjust your volume up and down on your computer. There's also a chat button, pardon me, at the bottom of the screen. And when you click there, a sidebar opens on the right-hand side where you can type in a question. As you type, your text will appear at the bottom of the bar, and it works much like a phone texting app or Facebook messaging. If you hit the return key on your keyboard, the text you've written in that little bubble will be sent. And if your question is for a reader, we will save that question to the end of the program and read it aloud and hopefully spur some discussion. If you have a technical problem, write your question in the chat sidebar and someone from our committee will try to help you via chat. Or if you have my email or Gary's email or Susan's for that matter, you can email to us around the side of the meeting and we'll try to help you. If you wish to applaud, please hold your hands up and wave them like so. And if you need to take a break, simply step away from your computer or device. We will be waiting eagerly for your return. that's the boilerplate. I'd like to get to the best part of the show now, which is the introduction of our readers. I'd like to begin this evening with Raquel Rich, who is a novelist and a blogger. She loves to travel, suntan, walk her dog, and is obsessed with all things beauty and the beast. She despises cold weather, balloons, and writing about herself in the third person, but she's noticed that all real authors tend to do it. She lives near Toronto. She is married and is the mother of 2 awesome grown-up boys and 1 fur baby. Her first novel is titled Hamartia and is described as a time travel thriller. Comments from Amazon include, quote, Rich has woven a complex and compelling story touching on time travel, immortality, family devotion, and intrigue. And Kirkus Reviews has said that Rich spins an ambitious and imaginative concept into a plot that is full of fantastically complicated twists. Throughout, the narrative raises and resolves questions at a brisk pace, making for a gripping page turner. Please welcome to LitLive Online, Raquel Rich.
Can I applaud myself?
Sure.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, first of all, LitLive. And thank you, everybody, for joining me. And Jocelyn, I love your dog. So I will be reading from Hamartia, which is a time travel thriller about a woman who is trying to save her son from a disease that's plaguing the human race. She agrees to take part in a clinical trial and travels back in time searching for the cure. But when she gets there, she discovers a horrible truth, and that is if she saves her son, it will come at a great cost. And the human race is counting on her to let her son die. So I have chosen a scene that's a little further along into the story. It's an action scene, and I'm going to bleep out all the spoilers, so you won't hear the spoilers. Slow footsteps turn into fast, shuffling feet coming toward the sound of the pager. Stupid pager. I didn't think that old guard could move that fast. And I wonder if it's a different one who might actually catch us and throw us out of here. The running feet are heading toward us. Shit, I whisper and jump up, grabbing Kay by the arm. We've got to get out of here fast. If we get split up, I tell her, meet back at the car. I see the beams of light on the cave walls, illuminating the space for a few seconds only, but enough to see Kay nod in agreement. Her eyes are wide. I spin and lead us deeper into the caves, feeling the way with my hands as I tiptoe run. It's useless, though. Every sound in here seems to be broadcasted on a megaphone announcing our whereabouts. I turn to tell Kay that we've got to run, but she's gone. What the hell? Did she misunderstand me? Does she think I actually told her to split up and meet at the car now? I don't have time to look for her. I've got to get out of here. But I don't have anywhere to go other than deeper into the caves. I run blindly into the darkness, not knowing if there is a way out of here. I fear I could collide with a wall. And whichever guard is behind me, he's closing the gap that separates us, fast. His flashlight brightens the caves around me, which should be showing me a path and a way out. But to my dismay, there is no guard, no ground ahead of me. There's a body of water and no way around it. I have nowhere to run. I glance over my shoulder. He is coming at me. Now I'm sure it's not the security guard we thought was doing his rounds. He's too quick and nimble. It's a man with a gun. I can't see his face, but I immediately assume that it's blah, blah, blah. And I don't understand why he's after us. I look down again, stare into the dark pool of water, not knowing how deep or how far, remembering Melvin's stories. But what do I do? Oh, shit. I draw in a long breath to hold, and I dive in. Bullets pelt past me, and I swim deeper, afraid to look back or up, afraid to stay near the surface and get shot, and equally afraid to continue swimming deeper into what could be a bottomless cave. I hear a splash and know that someone has jumped in after me. It's strange, but I think I still hear gunshots, which makes no sense if the shooter is in the water. Can you even shoot a gun underwater? Unless it's at Kay. I chance a quick look behind, hoping to see my best friend at my back, but she's not. It's a man, flashlight in hand, his hair floating around him and then not as he pushes the water behind, closing the gap between us with each stride to catch me. I stop looking back. There's no time for that. I just need to swim harder, faster, and deeper. It's getting darker down here, which is a good sign that I'm swimming fast enough to get away from his flashlight. but the bad part is that I can't see where I'm going. I don't know if there is another side to this water hole, or if this is one of the spots that Melvin spoke about, where one can die for an eternity and never emerge. I pray for a way out as my fears start to convince me that I'm swimming to a dead end. What then? I've come this far and that's it? Is this where my story ends? Absolute death is what runs through my brain as my lungs scream for air and I don't see, feel, or imagine a way out. I'm at such a depth and distance now that even if I turned back, I don't know that I could hold my stale air without gasping for breath before reaching the surface. I'm at the point of no return, so I swim harder and faster. If I'm going to swim toward a dead end, I'm going to do it with everything I have left, in case I'm wrong. I wonder if in my next life I will have a fear of drowning, or a fear of water, or of dark spaces and caves. I wonder if this will be the new scar that I leave on my soul. Am I going to make it? Please, let me make it, I beg inside my pounding head. Air escapes through my nostrils, bubbles rising, at first involuntarily, but then I deliberately let out more. I feel like if I just give a few more bubbles away, maybe it will relieve the pressure in my tightening chest. I was wrong. Deflating my lungs even that little bit is making them crave air, fresh, stale, any kind of air. The fit within me to suck in is dizzying. I'd love to turn around and swim back, but it doesn't matter. I can't turn around anymore. I'm too far. My only hope is making it to the other side. Just a few more kicks. I can do this. I can do this. I kick hard with my whole body. I'm swimming in complete darkness, so either the man is gone or his flashlight is off. Either way, I'm dead, or we both are, so it won't matter what happens from here on in. I change direction and swim upward, hoping to reach the surface and not bang my head on the ceiling of the cave while still underwater. I don't even try to protect my head from hitting anything. I think I'd rather die of a broken neck than drowning, which right now is a real possibility. I'm this close to sucking in water. The urge is overwhelming, and the pocket of air left inside me might actually be weighing me down, sinking me, and in a final effort, I push the rest of it out, pushing with my arms, my legs like egg beaters on high. And then I break through the surface, and I don't hit my head, but the air on my face hits me like a vortex. It's cold and warm all at the same time. I'm drinking it up, gasping as I inhale sweet oxygen into my aching lungs, coughing, gulping in the air until I'm drunk on it, and I choke on it. I go under again, involuntarily, but bob right back up to continue overdosing on air. I float on my back for a moment, eyes shut. Actually, wait a second, my eyes are open, wide open, but I'm in complete and utter darkness. There are no lights in this section, and the few seconds of relief at indulging in new air to breathe is quickly replaced by panic when I realize I'm probably cornered in a dead end. The thought of possibly having to go back from where I came from makes me cry with frustration. I can't see anything around me and fear I'm treading water with nowhere to go, expending what's left of my energy. Maybe there's a ledge. I wave my arms around, feeling for one or for something to grab onto, but there's nothing. I widen my eyes, squeeze them shut, open them again, trying to adjust to the darkness, but it's no use. I can't see a thing. The dark is just too thick. I need to calm down. So I try to focus on listening to the sounds around me. Am I alone? Yes, I think I'm alone. I can't hear anything or anyone else, not even an echo. What strikes me as odd if I'm in a cave, but the lack of echo could be a good thing. That can mean I'm not closed in. Maybe there's no roof, an opening over my head? Or even better, maybe there's an exit, a way for me to get out of here. I need to find my way back to the car and to Kay. I'm not sure how I feel that we were separated. It happened so quickly, I have to wonder if she left me on purpose. I ignore my doubts about Kay and instead focus on getting out of here. I try to calm myself by floating on my back with my ears underwater, listening to my internal breathing, thinking. I come out from under the water, will myself to calmly swim in one direction as leisurely as possible, so as not to waste what's left of my strength in case I gotta keep going. My legs are already burning from my rigorous swim to wherever it is that I am. When I finally reach a ledge and drag my limp body out, I say a silent thank you that the lack of echo led me to believe that there was no roof over my head and a way out. Not that this cave would go on for so long that I would have to swim forever to get to the other side, which is the real reason there's no echo. If I had understood the sheer size of this cave, I might not have had the willpower to continue. If I'd known my destination was 20 minutes away and not mere seconds, I don't think I would have pushed as I did. Okay, maybe it wasn't 20 minutes, but it sure felt like swimming the length of two of those old-fashioned Olympic-sized pools they used to have in competition when the world was divided into countries. Now I just lie on the ground, soaked and exhausted, my eyes barely open, slowing my breathing and allowing my rubbery muscles to recover. I replay the image of the man swimming toward me, his hair swooshing around him. It was dark, so I could only make out his shape and not his skin color or anything like that, but I'm quite sure that blah blah blah's kinky hair wouldn't flow around even if it was long enough. And he needs me to identify the donor, so why would he be after me? I think about what that might suggest, but I don't come up with any ideas. My brain is too tired. But I need to find my way back to the car. And at least now I see a light at the end of the tunnel, literally. The cave does have an exit. The stars and the moonshine create shadows at the hole leading to the outside. 2 minutes. That is the recovery time I will allow myself. I count back slowly in my head from 100, 84, 83, 82. Ah, screw it. I force my eyes open, stand up, and fake it. When I reach the exit, I peer out slowly, my heart racing. I'm paranoid, and why wouldn't I be? I've just been shot at and chased to the brink of drowning. I cautiously make my way out of the death trap cave, but not before removing my wet jean shorts and sopping wet shoes. The shorts were chafing my inner thighs and making rubbing noises when I walked, and the shoes were making swishing sounds, doing me no favors if I want to remain unseen. I carry them and feel weird about tiptoeing around half naked in the desert, but my panties and tank top are quiet, allowing me to dart around the bushes and behind cacti without disturbing anything. I try not to think of the snakes or other animals lurking in the dark, especially since I'm barefoot. I just head back in the direction I think that I came from. When I arrive at the car, my stomach sinks to the soles of my feet. The car is wide open, but Kay is nowhere to be seen. She must have gotten here before me, but something chased her away, or someone. Kay, I speak out against my better judgment. I hear a rustling behind me. Shit, someone is here. And that's where I will leave off. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Thank you very much, Raquel. Raquel reading from Hamarsha, and her book is available on Amazon.ca, and also you can purchase directly from Raquel through raquelrich.com. Thank you very much for your reading, especially under duress. Excellent performance. Thank you. Next up, we have Diane Terrana. Diane is the executive editor at The Rights Factory, a Toronto literary agency, and has been editing manuscripts for the agency since 2011. She is an award-winning instructor in the University of Toronto's creative writing program, and her debut young adult novel, The World on Either Side, was published by Orca Books in September of 2019. Diane spends a lot of time in her head, so occasionally she likes to get out of it. To that end, she went skydiving with her son on his 21st birthday, an experience that felt out of body as well. She lives in the GTA with her husband, her son, their calico cat, and a Siberian husky. Her two oldest kids have left home, but they still haven't cleaned out their rooms. Please, a warm welcome for Diane Terrana.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Susan, Chris, and Gary. I'm thrilled to be invited to LitLive. This is my novel, The World on Either Side. It's a YA novel inspired by a trekking trip I took with my 14-year-old daughter to Thailand several years ago, and then by several tragedies in my children's high school. This is a novel about grief and loss. The protagonist is a 16-year-old girl, and the elevator pitch is a deeply depressed girl, a profoundly damaged boy try to save a orphaned elephant calf from poachers. I'm reading two excerpts. The first one is from the beginning, so I don't need to set up anything. Air. I'm pondering it. Just random thoughts, like how you're barely aware of it when it's flowing smoothly in and out of your lungs. Or how if you fall into it, it can't reach you. How it only seems weightless, and how you can't tie it into knots. I stole the last one from Buddha, who made me think of air in the first place. Or I should say Buddha's, because everywhere I look, I see his round face. It's on the jewelry, pillows, tapestries, paper umbrellas, and paintings in Chiang Mai's crowded night market, where I inch along with my invincible mother. Whenever we accidentally bump someone, we why. That means we put our hands together, fingers pointing up, and bow our heads. Everyone does it here. It's a traditional Thai thing that means hello, goodbye, I'm sorry, nice to meet you, and probably a whole lot more. We are here in this ancient capital of an ancient empire to meet our guide. Tomorrow morning, he will lead us into the mountains where we'll trek and live with the hill tribes. That means sleeping bags, outhouses, and cold showers. Walking uphill for hours, skidding downhill. Shock treatment tourism. This trip is for me, to get me out of bed, to get me happy again, and of course, to get me over a mirror. Weird thought. Air is a mirror without the M. I finally went to his grave. Mom convinced me to. She wanted me to face my grief. She wanted me to find some closure, and she wanted me to leave my room. Maybe I really wanted to go all along. Maybe I felt I owed her for the pain I'd caused, or maybe I thought I could knock the very, very heavy thing out of my chest. In any event, I walked the 5 blocks to the cemetery. The gates were open, and as I entered, I had a visceral reaction. Sweating palms, pounding heart, swelling lump in my throat. I kept a nervous eye out for Mrs. Einman, Amir's mother, who, according to Mum, visited his grave every day. I didn't want to see her. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. I hadn't even gone over to his house to see how they were, and they lived just next door. Mum and Dad begged me to, but I couldn't. I'd let him down, maybe even failed him. And then later, when I wanted to see them, I was too ashamed for not going earlier. I'm sure they hate me by now, and I don't blame them. I hate me too. It took me forever to find his grave. I wandered endlessly through the rows until I saw his name carved into a slab of speckled granite. There was something shocking, air-sucking in fact, about the headstone, with the stark name and the dates underneath. Amir Ayman, 2000 to 2016. There were 2 inscriptions, one in Arabic and one in English. The heart is the secret inside the secret. Rumi. Rumi, the mystical Sufi poet born in 13th century Afghanistan. His full name is Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi, which I think explains why everyone just calls him Rumi. We studied him in Mr. Singh's class. I read the inscription out loud. I didn't get it. Why the secret inside the secret? Why do people even write epitaphs? Were they messages for the dead person? Some kind of superstition passed down from the ancient Egyptians? Advice for the afterlife? Or messages for the devastated people left behind, like me? Something inspirational to ease the pain. If so, this one was a bust. I didn't cry, I couldn't. I've lost the gift. But the heavy thing inside my chest expanded until I could barely breathe. My legs buckled and I sank to my knees in the snow-dappled March grass. I looked like I was praying, but I wasn't. I was railing. Later at home, I vowed I would never go back to the place where Amir, beautiful, strong, fast, funny, sweet, warm Amir, lies rotting under a layer of dirt. When I want to remember Amir, I'll lie on the grass and squint at the sun as it glints through the oak trees in my backyard. Amir loved the sun. He loved all stars. After high school, he wanted to go to Waterloo and study physics and astronomy. He was a geek and a jock, the only hybrid in our grade. He was full of fun facts about football and baseball, especially the Toronto Blue Jays, and the universe, especially stars. Example, there are 10,000 stars for every grain of sand on Earth. Neutron stars were stars that tried to die but couldn't. If you could fold a piece of paper in half 50 times, it would reach the sun. As impossible as this seems, it's true. I've seen the math. We are 50 folds from the sun. Now, every time I fold paper, I think about stars and Amir. My second excerpt takes us into the novel, well into the trek. Valentine, my heroine, and Lynn, a young local guide and elephant keeper, have become separated from the larger group with an orphaned elephant calf, whose name is Mohawk, named by Valentine because he has red bristles on the top of his head. Mohawk raises his trunk and trots towards us. Lynn's face changes. He looks around and puts a finger to his lips. Mohawk's trunk points into the jungle. His ears are open wide. He stares, transfixed at the trees. Lynn and I both follow his gaze. At first, there is only the hum of insects and the flap of birds' wings. Then there's crackling, like a strong wind is moving through the trees. By the time I hear the voices, Lynn is pulling me and Mohawk back into the shade of the jungle. Mohawk shakes visibly, which makes me think he recognizes the voices. Lynn keeps putting his finger in front of his lips, and I really freaking hope that Mohawk gets the gesture. The men are noisy, angry. Their yelling gives us sound camouflage so we can keep moving despite breaking branches and snapping twigs. If they kept quiet and listened, they would find us in seconds. For the first minute, maybe two, we walk backward, as though we'll be safe if we keep watching the entry point. A staccato burst of gunfire rips the sky. Cawing birds explode from the trees. I desperately hope their sounds cloak my involuntary shriek and Mohawk's quick trumpet. Lynn hugs Mohawk close. He strokes his trunk and head and gently shushes him. Mohawk responds with silence. I swear he understands everything that's going on. What were they shooting? I mouth to Lynn. Nothing, Lynn whispers in my ear, his lip brushing my neck. They shoot the air because they are mad. The big blade of the machete gripped in his fist glints reassuringly. I press the sharp point of my knife, still open in my sweaty hand. It isn't much, not compared to assault rifles, but it's something. I think with the sick stomach of the phone Mom tried to hand me before we split up. Even with the patchy coverage here, it would have given me some hope. Lynn takes my free hand in his and squeezes. Mohawk reaches across with his short trunk and holds our hands. Then he strokes my face with the tip of his trunk, feeling each contour, exploring, like he's trying to understand who and what I am. Like me, he can't quite believe what is happening. Lynn becomes all business. First, he gets us turned around slowly. It's not easy for Mohawk. We have 2 smallish feet. He has 4 big feet. He takes up a lot of room and there's no room, no path, no clearing, just jungle. Finally, facing forward, we walk quickly. I get a kink in my neck though from looking back. Within a couple of minutes, we're in even denser foliage. It's as though dusk has dropped. The sun doesn't penetrate the thick canopy of leafy branches. We squeeze between trees and push through shrubs. I mostly keep my head down, looking out for roots, vines, rocks, and holes, so I don't trip or turn my ankle. A sudden movement across my foot almost makes me gasp. A small striped snake flicks its tail and disappears. Gnats prick through my clothes and feast at the back of my neck. It's damp, it's green. Green is virtually the only color, in fact, except for brief patches of dark dirt. I feel so hidden, almost safe. How could they find us here? In the distance, the men suddenly yell out. I freeze. Lynn turns back and listens, head cocked, eyes narrowed. Then they snap open. They come after us. They track us. I wrestle some air into my lungs and dry my sweaty palms on my pants. The knife won't do me any good if I can't keep it in my grip. Not that it's likely to do me any good anyway, but I won't go down without a fight. Lynn makes us wait. My chest nearly explodes with fear as he scales a tall, slender tree. At the top, he scans the entire area, and then he shimmies down. He leads us through feathery fronds, plants so fragile we trample them flat, leaving a clear trail for anyone to follow. I remind myself of what Max said, that they won't want to shoot a tourist. But what if Max was wrong? It is possible, entirely likely even, that very soon I will be dead, shot to pulp, like the other elephants. Mom and Dad won't have a daughter, any child at all. They won't be parents anymore. I feel worse for them than I do for me. It's much worse to be left behind, as I well know. I have a long moment while Lynn helps Mohawk over a log, then under a branch, to wonder if it's too late to hand Mohawk over to the men. If we could just have a peaceful handoff, and then they could let Lynn and me go. It would spare Mom and Dad. They wouldn't have to put me in a coffin and watch me go into the dirt, if they even got a body to bury. I look at Mohawk, at his wrinkled gray baby skin, his scalloped ears, his silly, ridiculous pin the tail on the donkey tail. Why should I prioritize him over Mom and Dad? They should be my priority. And they are. They are. They're my parents and I love them. If I can save my life by turning Mohawk in, I should just do it. I would expect them to sacrifice him to help me. That's a no-brainer. So why don't I? Why don't I at least suggest it to Lynn? Maybe I'm afraid of what he'll think of me. Maybe I'm afraid of what I'll think of myself. All I know is that when I look at Mohawk, his trusting eyes, his affectionate trunk, and his scared, stiff ears, I can't portray him. I just can't. Thank you.
Yay, Diane. Thank you very much for that reading. A very interesting book, Diane Terrana reading from The World on Either Side, which came from Orca Books in September of last year. To round out our first half this evening, I'd like to introduce to you George Down. G.W. Down is a poet, lyricist, editor, and business consultant who lives in Hamilton. Since 2012, he has been the editor-in-chief of Tower Poetry, which is a biannual periodical published by the Tower Poetry Society. He's the former president of Tower Poetry and also a former chairman of the Hamilton Arts Council Literary Committee. He's also a partner in the Book Band, a company which does marketing, distribution, and distribution promotion, I should say, for Canadian publishers. He is reading tonight from his new book, Sonnets for Sahara Nights, which came out from Potlatch Publications, and it is his third book of poetry. Please, a warm welcome for George Down.
Thank you very much, Chris. And thanks to all the members of the LitLive organizing outfit. This has been a very interesting evening. And thanks also to the Hamilton Arts Council and to all the sponsors of LitLive. Sonnets for Sahara Nights is primarily a story about the love affair between the narrator and a woman named Sahara. Unfortunately, love does not always flow smoothly. To move toward the kisses her mood blew is to step into quickening sand and dance through the hours of an interlude too brief. When enveloped in her embrace, race as your pulse may, the spiraling slewed view that waltzes your eyes slides back to stand grand, then glissades close to build hope, delude you in measured steps with quick, slow grace. Trace your palm across the heat of time's facade. Hold firm against its broken rock veneer. Decelerate the tempo this charade pursues. Throw off the beat and draw clear a while. Its nature seeks to heighten trust, then suck in all, turn every dream to dust. Well, about this woman, Sahara, then. Unlike the African expanse that shares her name, Sahara does not instantly divulge the spectrum of her traits, but wears a cloak of nuanced tones. Explorers see the desert's range from aerial photos which map its contours. They can brave its sand with captioned images at hand, oppose its arid waste provisioned, and withstand temptation of mirages it reveals. It is reported to be cold at night in deserts. With this woman, though, one feels no varying degrees to put to flight the steady heat that breaks reserve apart, that shimmers through the layers of her heart. This poem is called Depth of Experience. The future shining like a lustrous gem. The world a pure, unsullied oyster bed, rich target prize for divers. Only spread your hands around the shells, pluck and spring them, and so pry loose the comfort that can stem the swirl of restive chance, push wealth ahead, breed safety in its bosom, nurtured, fed to thwart unease, defeat any problem. That was the way I saw life then, when youth conspired to boost ambition, blind the eye to obstacles. Fractious fate shows more tooth, seems more the mother of misfortune. High hopes crushed when dashed on rocks revealed the truth that purling streams of luck can soon run dry. And this poem is called Cyclical Phenomena. Some say the desert will revert to green millennia from now. The African Sahara vanish, as was last the scene a host of eons past. Pulses quicken and hearts flood, sanguine at the prospect, though Sahara to Savannah will progress inexorably slowly. Even so, our race rejoices, longs for it no less. We can embrace the notion time will steer its pendulum once more toward fertile growth. Too often, our relationship will veer and mirror this phenomenon, for both our loving and its force majeure can wane, then alter course and switch to on again. There are 65 poems in this book. I'm reading a small sample. If you'd like more, the book is available from local independent bookstores in Hamilton and in Burlington, or from Potlatch Publications, or from the Book Band at www.thebookband.com. That's the Book Band, B-A-N-D. I'm grateful to Bob Nielsen, the publisher at Potlatch Publications, for his faith in the book and for publishing it. The next poem I'm going to read is, I believe, one of his especial favorites. It's In Search of a Birthday Card. The cards the stores display elicit scorn. They focus on the sender, full of I and what I feel, how I would be forlorn were not I able to engage with my emotions at this time, and how I yearn to express them. But it is her birthday. So why do those messages concern themselves with me? In every line they bray their egocentric greeting. With disdain they must be treated, with contempt. Be bold to send instead a tribute and explain the ways in which the world is blessed to hold her presence. Shower praise on her eclat. Let the whole note bear testament to that. Heaven must be an ocean, was her song, repeated often, not sung, but sirened, in gentle notes inviting us along to wonders hemmed in by no horizon. With relish, she envisioned heaven's scope, a seeming endless vastness, rolling tide and soothing waves, embracing crests that slope with ease to where no trouble can reside. But oceans also rage and foster storms, typhoons, tsunamis, ships thrown up on rocks. Can we endure an ocean with no forms of beach or island, harbor, shoreline walks? Though water was our species' origin, can we be certain we'll be where we've been? I've heard, of course, of the foolhardiness inherent in attempting to traverse the desert by oneself, alone. Perverse it's known to be. For injury, distress, sunstroke, sandstorm, confusion can beset a traveler. Mirage can steer him wrong. Too few oases dot the route. too long the distance one palm to the next. And yet the will to cross cannot be held in check. Some thirsts prove difficult to satisfy, but faith brings power as the spirit's freed. Though it may seem I'm on a solo trek, I have my own Sahara always by, so I will not be unaccompanied. And I believe I have time for one more. This is called Firing Blanks. Another era it was, long ago, when she would scream at slim new moon and stars, delight in chiding them, inviting them to shed their limiting, inhibiting nocturnal canopy, and vault with her to cosmic paradisic apices. The zenith of our physical amour has passed, declining into autumn's grasp. Much ardent passions lost its potent tip, and many salvos miss their practiced range. But still, through melded minds, our love endures, can strike so passion's spark will cease to wane, with fervid zeal again begin to burn. So, like the hunter's moon, it will return. It was an honor to read for you tonight. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, George. Wonderful reading. You have a very vivid and visual approach to language, and we appreciate it very much. That closes our first set. We're going to have our intermission and our musical performance at this time with Gareth Inkster. I see Gareth on my screen here. Let me just introduce you to him. Gareth Inkster is an independent musician from Hamilton, Ontario. Having studied classical piano and violin, he seeks to incorporate his harmonic training into contemporary songs, his own contemporary songs, achieving definitively colorful backdrop to his catchy and memorable melodies. With a career spanning solo releases, collaborative projects, and extensive studio work as a musician and producer, Inkster is a versatile, valuable, and experienced member of Hamilton's music scene. Please, Gareth, take the stage. It's over to you. The audio, yes. Gary?
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
It's occurred to me that I'm not actually certain. I didn't check the time when I started, so I'm happy. I'll just keep going, and you just tell me when to stop, and I'll stop. All right? Uh, Chris, you're muted. I can see that you're talking, and I can try to interpret. Oh wait, I think you said. Oh, you know what? I bet Gary has to permit you to speak.
Here we go. No, I'm free to say. It's up to you. If you want to do a couple more minutes, if you got something else, that's fine. But we can go straight if you like.
Yeah, no, I've got I'll go a bit more. I
give us
I
one.
realized there was a delayed start too, so I don't want to be pushing people. I'll go a few more minutes, and then I'll check in with you. How's that?
Okay, great.
are we looking for time, eh? There you go.
There we go. Yeah, that was great, Gareth. Thank you very much. I think in terms of time, it's just about right. Thanks for your performance. Thanks for joining us tonight.
So happy to.
It was a real pleasure to have you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
As is probably apparent, we're tinkering with this is only the second time that we've done a Zoom version of LitLive. So we're tinkering with the process a little bit, and we were just getting started with some of the things available to us, like a Q&A session, which we ran at the end of our last event in September. I'll update you at the end of our program about whether we can do Q&A tonight or not. I'm not certain if that's possible. But for now, I'd like to move briskly into our second half and bring on two more writers that we have with us tonight who've been patiently sitting by. The first is Victoria Freeman, who is a writer, theater artist, and public historian. Her new book, A World Without Martha, a memoir of sisters, disability, and difference, was shortlisted for the 2020 Lambda Award for Bisexual Nonfiction. She's the co-creator with L'Arche Toronto Soul Express of Birds Make Me Think About Freedom, a play about the experiences of peoples institutionalized for intellectual disability, which premiered at the 2018 Toronto Fringe Festival. Victoria also she co-wrote the Talking Treaties Spectacle, performed at historic Fort York in Toronto in 2017 and 2018. And as well, she wrote By These Presents, Purchasing Toronto, and purchasing is in quotation marks. It is a film about the Toronto Purchase, which is the surrender of lands in the Toronto area in 1787 from the Mississaugas of New Credit to the British Crown. And her previous book, Distant Relations, How My Ancestors Colonized North America, was shortlisted for the 2000 Writers' Trust Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing. Please, let's have a warm welcome for Victoria Freeman.
Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here tonight. I want to thank Gary and Chris and Susan, my fellow readers, and all of you who are still here who are not would-be porn stars. So this is a memoir. When I was 4 years old, my sister Martha, who was 20 months old at the time, was sent to live in an institution for people with intellectual disabilities. That was in 1960. For the next 13 years, she lived at the Rideau Regional Center, a huge and overcrowded complex of 50 buildings just outside Smith Falls, Ontario, that at its peak housed 2,600 residents. So my book explores how my sister's birth and institutionalization profoundly impacted my whole family. Her experience was incalculably more difficult than mine, but like many siblings of those who were institutionalized, I was also deeply affected and in fact have been haunted all my life by what happened. Among other things, I feared a similar banishment from the human race as a queer and genderqueer person. Among other things, my book is a reckoning with what it means to live and participate in a world where only some people are deemed worthy of love. So I'm going to start with a passage at the beginning of the book about some of the attitudes that were around when my sister Martha was born. And this is the book. If my sister was not fully human, what was she? The words moron, idiot, and imbecile would cling to my sister all her life like Pigpen's dirt. As with the word retarded, these words had once aimed for neutral, even scientific description, but became insults in the pejorative creep to which all attempts to describe intellectual disability eventually succumb. Today's developmentally delayed will likely go the same way. The roots of the words are telling. Moron comes from the Greek moron, the neuter form of moros, meaning foolish. The Greek word idiotus means not only an ignorant person, but also a private person, a plebeian or a layman, all derived from idios, peculiar, private. My sister was not technically an idiot, but from the moment of her birth, she was relegated to a lower plane of existence that was both peculiar and private, the world of the subhuman. And the place where such creatures belonged was away. No, in the eyes of the scientific experts of the time, my younger sister was not a moron or an idiot, but an imbecile. The term comes from the Latin imbecillus, meaning weak or weak-minded. It referred not only to people with moderate to severe intellectual impairment, but also to a type of criminal, a moral imbecile. The doctors did not refer to my sister as an imbecile in front of my parents. Everyone called her a mongoloid, a word first coined by John Langdon Hayden Down, the superintendent of the Earlswood Asylum for Idiots in Surrey, England, who in 1866 gave the first clinical description of the condition that would later bear his name. He chose this term because the epicanthic fold at the corner of the eyes of people with Down syndrome made them look vaguely Asian or Chinese. Reflecting the widespread scientific racism of the time, which held that the Caucasian was intellectually superior to the Mongoloid race, Down theorized that such children suffered from arrested ethnic development. Quote, "There can be no doubt that these ethnic features are the result of degeneration." My mother was told shortly after my sister's arrival that she would have an IQ of no more than 45. I know now that the degree of disability in people with Down syndrome varies widely, and it's not possible to measure the extent of cognitive impairment at birth. But the doctors were the experts. Their pronouncements had the terrible dismissive finality, the utter infallibility of the judgments of the Old Testament Jehovah. And my parents, in their terror and ignorance, believed them. We soon experienced the tyranny of another powerful word that affected us just as profoundly, but did not draw attention to itself in the way those other words did. For years, my family used it without thinking, since it seemed to describe something so obvious, so permanently inscribed in human nature, so natural and unchanging that we never questioned it. We had no idea that the word normal had only entered the English language 100 years earlier. Something that when Alfred Kettelut in 1842 conjured up the average man. Something that disability scholar Rosemary Garland Thompson in Staring, How We Look, would later call a statistical phantom who stands in for us all. Before the concept of the normal or statistically average person was invented, the common view, expressed particularly in the Bible, was that all human beings were flawed at birth. One aspired to an ideal of human perfection, to be sure, but no living person could possibly attain it. Humankind reflected the infinite diversity of God's creation, even if the divine purpose in creating that variety remained inscrutable. God worked, it was said, in mysterious ways. In the new rational and progressive world of the 1950s that my sister and I were born into, such mystery had been banished. On the one hand, North Americans, white ones at any rate, imagined themselves as independent, unique, self-determining individuals. On the other, standardization proceeded apace. In universal education, mass production, mechanical reproduction of images, and advertising. There were the normal people, as defined by science and statistics, who, it appeared, lived the only lives truly worth living. And then there were the deviants and failures. In the Cold War logic that prevailed through most of my childhood, these were enemy others who had to be contained. As Ian Hacking, a philosopher of science, comments in The Social Construction of What, the word normal was one of the most powerful ideological tools of the 20th century. So I go on to describe what happened after she was institutionalized. My sister had disappeared. I did not know where she was. I did not know why she had gone. I could not comprehend her absence or why my parents seemed to be so accepting of it. I felt a kind of horror, a dread nothingness. I could not name what wasn't there. Where was my sister? I became obsessed with this question. I asked my mother and she patiently tried to explain, but the words didn't make sense to me. Where was my sister? Where was Martha? Who had taken her? Where had she gone? My mother grew short-tempered with me and told me to buck up. Martha was gone, and there was nothing I could do and nothing I could say that would change that. No one wanted to hear what I thought or felt about it. My parents said it was for the best, and they did it for me. I knew I should be grateful. And I did feel so privileged that they did this for me. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. I became complicit. I agreed with it. I accepted it. Even now, more than 50 years later, I can't begin to express the rage I felt, the bitter sense of loss. I was never able to speak it then. I swallowed it down, was a good girl, denied my pain to lessen the pain of others. I did this out of love for my parents, but also out of fear, for if my parents did not love Martha, perhaps they only pretended to love me. Perhaps one day I would also be sent away. I had not just lost Martha then, I had lost the security of my parents' love. My rage didn't change anything, and over time it dissipated. Eventually, my feelings about my sister were locked away, hidden in a place so private that even I did not acknowledge its existence. A tiny, windowless room with a locked door that rarely opened and was guarded. A place where no one looked in and from which no sound escaped. What went on there, no one knew. Whatever lurked in there could die, could starve, and I wouldn't care. No one would. It was a place without air, a place of radical emptiness, where nothing could or should exist. And yet, something did. So I'm going to move forward. So I mentioned how this affected me as I was developing my own sense of my identity. As I put my life back together, I gradually acknowledged another secret, split off part of myself that I'd kept hidden for years, but had threatened to reveal itself or be exposed. I did not know how to live with my own difference, a difference I felt deep down, but which, unlike Martha's difference, was not immediately visible to others. Ever since meeting Esther in high school, I had known that I was attracted to women as well as men. I accepted that intellectually, but given my traumatic experience of my sister's exclusion and marginalization for being different, I lived in terror of leaving or being banished from the heterosexual norm for some marginal, undefined place. But even more than my fears of exclusion and persecution What I could not bear was the thought of disappointing my parents. It wasn't even that I feared they would reject me outright. I didn't think they would. I feared there would always be an unfathomable chasm between us if I revealed myself to them. I would have dashed their hopes and dreams, just as Martha had. I profoundly believed that they needed me to be normal, and I could not bear to hurt them, even if it meant disowning a part of myself. So I'm just skipping to the last part of the book. There's a lot more that happens. So in 2012, I returned to the site of the Rideau Regional Center after it had been closed down. And I'll just read some of the excerpt. This is my last part from that visit. It amazes me now that that was the first time in my life that I truly asked Martha what Martha had experienced at that institution, and in particular, what it had been like to be left there. Staring out at the massive complex of buildings, I began to imagine the enormity of being abandoned there at the age of 20 months. You sleep in the car on the way to Smith Falls, and then you are left here, held here. People push spoonfuls of food into your mouth, change your dirty diaper, wipe your bum and your pudendum, some of the many things that are simply done to you. Those you knew before are like phantoms in a dream. Not one thing here is real. It is at first an utterly meaningless life, shapeless, formless, strange. Not one thing is familiar except your own hand, your foot, your own breath, your fingers. You have lost the one who gave birth to you and everyone and everything else you knew. You are a small, helpless child, wanting and needing to be lovingly cared for and sheltered, and not understanding why your parents are no longer here. You have no language whatsoever for that enormous void, that terrible loneliness, that awful despair that persists day in and day out for a very long time. You are so vulnerable, so dependent, in a strange place with hundreds, no, thousands of others. The routines become familiar, but are completely independent of who you are. People come and go for no apparent reason. You were assailed by strange foods, strange smells, strange sounds, strange hands. No one knows who you were before. You lie for long periods in a wet diaper, cold or hot. No one comes. You cry and no one hears. Too many are crying. Shut up, kid. Nothing makes sense. You must start over or die, become a different you. And yet, somehow, you do not die. You survive in this new world where no one loves you and where there's so many others, all clamoring for attention. You have no idea of what has happened. No one has even tried to explain it to you. You become angry, withdrawn, aggressive, rough. You fight for your space, for yourself. You fight to survive. Yet somehow you continue to love us in spite of what we have done to you. In spite of my distance and neglect, you love me. Thank you very much.
Well, that was Victoria Freeman reading from A World Without Martha, which was published by UBC Press. Thank you very much, Victoria. Although the material is obviously personally difficult and very striking, your style is very disciplined, a very powerful reading. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next and final reader this evening is Keith Ross Leckie. Keith Leckie has been a storyteller for more than 40 years, working in film and television in Canada and the United States. A proud Canadian with a love of our history, Keith has scripted these well-known shows: The Avro Arrow, The Halifax Explosion, Everest, Where the Spirit Lives, which is about native residential schools, Children of My Heart, and the Russell Williams story, An Officer and a Murderer. Keith has also directed films and television series. And now a novelist, his second book was Coppermine, the story of the show trial in 1917 in Edmonton of two Inuit hunters who were charged with the murder of two Catholic priests. And his latest novel, the one I hope he's reading from tonight, is called Cursed, The Blood of the Donnellys, which tells the story of the notorious family who on February 4th, 1880 in Lucan, Ontario, were massacred at the hands of an angry mob. Both novels have been optioned for film production. Please, a warm welcome for Keith Ross Leckie. Gary? Can you unmute?
Yeah, I can.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris and Susan, for the invitation to be here. I'm very honored to be with Raquel and Diane, who's an old friend, and George and Victoria. Yes, I've written this book on the Donnellys, which I'll show you. It's Cursed, Blood of the Donnellys, and by Douglas and McIntyre. And I've always been fascinated with the Donnelly story. I love big epic stories, and this one has been told many times, many novels, nonfiction books, plays, songs. There's a musical that has been staged in Edmonton and London, Ontario, and it's called Vengeance. And, you know, the interpretation of the Donnelly family has always been fascinating to me. Here was a family that at the hands of this angry mob were most of them massacred on February 4th, 1880. And they've been portrayed as innocent lambs, and they've been portrayed as monsters. And I think there's more complexity to the story. I've always thought that. I wanted to understand the individual characters. They had 7 sons and 1 daughter. They were rascals, and they certainly burned down barns, and they harassed people, but they were very attractive. They were musicians, they were womanizers, they were fighters. They were a fascinating family, and I believe that we needed another version of the story for a contemporary audience. So I wrote Cursed. And the question, well, I had experience with them, with Lucan, the town of Lucan, which when I was a kid, I was taken there by my dad, and we talked to a fellow in the general store. And my dad, who was gregarious and was fascinated with stories like this, asked, what can you tell us about the Donnellys? And I remember the store owner on the main street of Lucan said, around here, we don't talk about the Donnellys. And so that really captured my imagination. It's taken 40 years, but I've finally done a rendering of the story that I think gives it the epic nature that I really wanted to capture, and that I think the Donnellys deserve. So the Donnellys, Jim and Joanna, as young lovers, left Ireland and came to Canada to escape the British oppression and the famines of Ireland at the time. And they were hoping to find a new country that they could escape all of that. And what they found were that the feuds of Ireland had followed them over, and they were eventually victimized by the feuds and by the blood feuds and the religious persecution and all of the things they were trying to escape. So anyway, I have 3 excerpts that I'd like to read tonight. The first is when Jim and Joanna, before they've had children, they come over in the ship. And it's the conditions of those fever ships in 1846. Over the following days and weeks, start again. When they finally took their few belongings into the gloom below decks, the hatches were closed tight for the night, and the stench of smoke, mildew, and human bodies hit them like a tangible wall. Joanna held her handkerchief over her mouth and nose as they ventured deeper into the hold, trying to keep their balance with the movements of the ship, lit only here and there with thin candles. There was a narrow corridor, which rough boards forming little pens against the curved, damp hull, each filled with bodies, faces watching them pass. Two babies cried in exhausted protest. A woman was whimpering, but most were very quiet, eerily so, for the entire hold was packed with people and stunned faces, looking out in tears 2 stories high, and yet all were quiet. Joanna had stopped and stared around in shock at what appeared like the image she had imagined of Dante's hell. She was here and must deserve to be here. Come on, Joe, we'll find some room below. Jim led them deeper past the silent faces to discover a couple of feet of space behind a bulwark near the bow against the thick hull timbers of the old ship. Here and there, seawater seeped through the broken deck boards into the bilge below. People shifted away a little to give them room to slide in, all joined together in the misery of their first night on what would prove a very long journey. After midnight, the wind increased. They could feel the power of the rising North Atlantic swells, and the ship began pitching violently, fighting a growing storm, the planks of her hull beneath their bodies creaking under the strain. Jim and Joanna sat holding on to each other in the oppressive darkness with only a frugal candle burning. She looked around again to glimpse the sick and fearful faces, men, women, and children huddling in small groups. Many of them had not seen the sea before, let alone been at its mercy. And the full storm began to rage outside. The crewmen made sure the leaking hatches were as secure as possible, while others worked along levers of bilge pumps. The ship rolled brutally and people gasped and groaned. A few began to get to be seasick and threw up in the few available buckets. Many missed as the ship plunged, or sometimes a bucket tipped over on a rolling wave and the floorboards were soon awash in vomit. Despite Joanna's initial refusal, she finally made use of a bucket nearby. Children were too traumatized to cry, and men cursed in helpless frustration as the vessel pounded against the northwest waves. There was nothing they could do but hold on for endless hours in the filthy, crowded, suffocating hold. So Jim and Joanna make it to Canada, and they actually find a piece of land that they want, and they decide to homestead it. So they do, in fact, squat on this land. They are advised that if they squat and improve it for 7 years, it will become theirs, which was the law of the land at that time. Over the following days and weeks, Jim, Vinnie, and Joanna cut a great number of sawed bricks from a small open meadow on the land, and then using lumber to reinforce them, piled them to form the walls of the temporary hut. Joanna became quite skilled at the work. Her nails were broken and dirty, her apron stained with mud, and she worked with little Will secured in a sheet on her back, and she was adept at piling the dirty sod. At the end of the day, she would collapse on a bed, aching and exhausted. She had never been so challenged, never worked so hard, but with the sod walls and a roof of poles, bark, and oilcloths, they were building a house and a world. Joanna was never so happy. Jim and Vinnie opened up a 100-foot square clearing back from the road and planted some barley and corn. The smoky fire was constantly consuming the green trunks and branches. When the rains came, they quickly turned the raw, dark earth of the new clearing into mud, but it was a warm summer rain and they continued to work. their hands and clothing coated in dirt and their faces spattered. They washed and took water from a little stream that ran south through the property, and they dammed it with sod and branches to create a modest pool where they could bathe. Once the summer rain turned torrential for almost a full day, and it was impossible to work, so they all took shelter under the unfinished pieces of oilcloth and bark that was their roof. The brush fire was impossible to keep going, and the little dam gave way in the swollen stream. On that day, they were wet and muddy and somewhat miserable as they looked out at the rain, but they were building the future. The rain comes, the rain goes, Vinny said philosophically. One step at a time, Joanna offered. And the rain will help that barley and corn, Jim said. Absolutely, Vinny agreed. On a summer day like today, my mother would make full use of this rain. Vinny smiled at the memory. She'd divide up a cake of soap and give us all pieces, send us out to wash our hair. If it kept up, we could soap up the clothes too, and so we'd clean ourselves and the clothes. Once we pulled her outside with us, all soapy, and danced in the rain. She was laughing. Joanna had intuited from his stories that his mother had later remarried and moved in with a new man who did not want children. So Vinny and his siblings had been thrown out and left homeless. You must miss her. Vinny looked out into the rain. Yeah, he said finally. At that moment, there was a sudden increase in the downpour, and the shelter of the makeshift roof proved marginal. Well, Joanna held up a large white bar. I've got the soap. Vinny's face broke into a huge smile. Let's go, said Jim, holding the baby Will, and all four of them ran out to wash and dance in the warm summer rain. So they make a go of this homesteading, but a man comes to claim the land. And what happens is there is a feud which ends in a fight, and Jim Donnelly kills Pat Farrell. He is accused of murder. He is charged and convicted, and he is sentenced to death. This is all true. So we begin. The hangman guided Jim to where he had to stand, over the trap door, and he and another policeman removed the shackles from his hands and feet. They were replaced by leather straps around his ankles and ties to his hands behind his back. You have anything to say, now's the time, the hangman told him. I send my love to my wife and children. I am sorry for taking the life of Pat Farrell, and I ask forgiveness here and afterwards, if there is an afterwards. There was nothing more to say. Jim would miss this life and his children, and most of all, the sweet woman who had loved him despite everything. There was nothing to do now but accept the event before him with the dignity of an Irish nobleman. Let's get on with it. The hangman approached him with the black hood in his hand. I don't want that. I'd rather do without. It's not for you, Donnelly. It's for the others, so they don't see what your face does. He put the hood roughly over Jim's head, so he was now all in darkness. He could hear the young priest reciting the 23rd Psalm. Jim supposed that too was more for the others than himself. He closed his eyes, despite the hood, and went back in his thoughts to the sunny glade beside the Ballyfinboy River, where he and Joanna had caught the salmon and years later made love for the first time. He waited there in that happy memory for the trap to spring. But what he heard was the creak of another door opening and a voice calling out, wait, is it done? There was a shuffling of feet below and muffled inquiries and agitated speaking, but Jim couldn't get the gist. Can a man not die in peace, he wondered? A voice called his name, and through the material of the hood, he finally said, yes, I am here. The hangman took the hood off his head, and he looked down to see a small, officious man with a message in his hand. The man seemed irritable, as if Jim's case was creating disorder in his orderly day. You are Jim Donnelly, correct? He asked again. Who else would I be? The small man continued with his chore. This is from the Attorney General's office. John A. MacDonald has granted you an order of clemency. What does that mean? It means you're not to be hanged, sir. Your sentence is commuted to 15 years in Kingston Penitentiary. Jim let the information sink in that he would not die today. It was a brief moment of joy. He would see her again. But almost immediately, he began weighing the long, hard prison time. All that time without her, 15 years. The noose almost seemed a kindlier destiny, but not quite. All right then, I'll take it. No one is giving you a choice, Donnelly. You will, in fact, not die today. Thank you. That's the excerpts. I would be happy to answer any questions. The Donnelly story is such a complex one, and I love talking about how it has evolved in Canada and who these people were, who these Donnellys were. So anyway, thank you for your time, and it's been wonderful to be with this group. And even though we had a couple of missteps at the beginning, it was all amusing. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Excellent reading. Thank you for reminding us of the strength of the Donnelly story. It's been it's one of those topics that is treated repeatedly, I think, through since the events that you're describing. On the subject of questions, Gary and I have just been discussing whether we can certainly have a Q&A session now, if you like. Those anyone who would like to ask a question might simply put up their hand, make their video apparent to the group, of course, put up their hand, and Gary will unmute you, and you can ask your question in the old school way. Or if you want to venture with the chat, you can type your question at the bottom of our chat feed and divert your eyes from the top of it, and we'll take up your question and put it to any writer that you wish to put it to. Well, perhaps not.
Well, lots of things to say. It's just, I think everybody's tired with the journey that we've been on.
Right. And it has been a stunning learning experience. Yes, but anyway, let's return to let's close off our event. First of all, I'd like to give my profound thanks to our 5 terrific readers: Raquel Rich, Diane, Terrana, George Down, Victoria Freeman, and Keith Ross Leckie. Let's have another round of applause, such as Zoom makes us. And of course, our special thanks to Gareth Inkster for providing a compelling musical intermission for us. Thank you, Gareth. Very fine indeed. Our next LitLive online will be on Sunday, the 1st of November at 7:30 p.m. And again, if you're on Gary's mailing list or Susan's mailing list, you'll probably receive an invite directly from one of them, or you'll be able to pick up the information about the next Zoom event on the Facebook reading series group on Facebook. And again, as I mentioned before, if any of the writers we had tonight, or Gareth for that matter, have a book or a recording that you would like to promote, send the link along to me, or you can post it directly onto the Facebook LitLive reading series group. We do like to promote before, during, and after the event, and we know that selling the artistic goods is an important part of what we're doing. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. I want to thank you for your patience, sticking with us in our moments of difficulty. We hope to keep these Zoom events going until the happy day that we can meet again in person. So I just wanted to say that, for all of the joys of Zoom, and there are some benefits to doing things this way, I do also look forward to the day when I can meet writers in person, shake their hands, look at their books, feel their books in my hands, and buy a few of them at a book table for your book. And we look forward to seeing you again in the near future. November the 1st will be our next opportunity to do so. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you